You're listening to the Fooled by the Root podcast.
Hello, precious people. I am so excited to introduce you to the matriarch of my birth family, my beautiful Aunt Louise. I am so happy that your first Zoom is with me. That's wonderful. Can you set the stage and tell us where you are?
Pennsylvania. I live in Pennsylvania. Was born here in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, a small historical town. And we just have this small town, but I wouldn't want to live anyplace else. I love the mountains here and my family's here, and I just wouldn't want to be anyplace else.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Louise. Well, I love Pennsylvania too. So I also want our audience to know, I'm sure you're proud to share your age.
I am 95, will be 96 on May the 21st, 2021, I'll be 96.
Wow, Aunt Louise. So can you tell our listeners and our viewers what you were riding on your birthday?
Do I have to say a
Harley?
Yeah. And I said I would never get on one of those, but they talked me into it, so I relented and did it.
Well, Aunt Louise, I hope at 95 I'm riding motorcycles. I think that's amazing. Well, Aunt Louise, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I want us to go way back in time because finding my birth family has been such a powerful thing for me. And I just wanted to go back historically because your brother was my birth mom's father. And if you could kind of go to that time and tell us about his untimely death and maybe just some of your experiences with my birth mom during that time, which kind of set the stage for the rest of the way everything went.
Well, my brother Bill was a very, very special person. We were very, very close. He was always there. All I needed to do was to call and he'd be right there. And he and Betty Jane were married, and they were very fortunate to be able to have Marty Joe. And my brother Bill and Betty, they wanted more children, but that wasn't to be. And I'll have to put a little joke in here. He would come over when Greg, my son, my youngest son, he was just a year old. And my brother Bill would come over and play with him. And one day he asked me, he said, "Give me Greg, you can have another one." That is how much my brother Bill loved family and children. The day, this brings us up, the day that he died, he took my mother and Marty Joe to church, and Betty Jane, after church, Betty Jane brought them home. And when they came up Monroe Street, where they lived, the ambulance were there. And right away, they took Marty Joe over to a neighbor's. And to my knowledge, I don't think Marty Joe saw my brother, her father, after that. And Marty Joe, I'm trying to think if she was around 4 or 5 years old. My brother Bill, they took him to the hospital, and it was on his birthday. 34 years old he was. And my son Terry was bitten by the neighbor's dog. And I, unknowingly, what was happening with my brother Bill, we took Terry to the hospital for the dog bite. The doctor was up on the floor where Bill was. He was taking care of Bill, and he had me come up to the nurse's station there that he checked Terry out, but he never told me that my brother Bill was in the hospital. Later, I asked him, why didn't he tell me? Because I could have at least, say goodbye to my brother Bill. He said I was so upset with Terry and the dog bite that he knew that wasn't the time for me to know that. So I went home. Terry and I took Terry home, and the next thing I knew, my mother and my father came in the door and told me that my brother Bill had died. that was an awful shock. And after that, I remember the funeral and everything. And then Marty Jo, she and her mom continued to live in their home. And I think during that time, I love my sister-in-law, and she was a good mom, but she was very, very strict with Marty Jo. And I know that Marty shared with me that there were times that she would go over to my mother, her grandma, and pour out her heart to my mom. And my mother was just this person just a wonderful person you could relax with, and she was so understanding. And so Marty Jo would go back home and she'd be okay. And there was only one time that Marty Jo told me that my mother ever talked to Betty Jane about the discipline of what had occurred. And but that was in I think had my mother lived, Heidi, things would have been a lot different. And had my brother lived, things would have been a lot different. Those years with Marty Jo, I mean, Betty Jane was busy. She went back to work, and we had family events and things like that. And then she married Jim Bryson, and Jim was a very, very nice person. We just felt like, we had another brother back. He was so good to my parents, and so nice to all of us, and included us in different things that they did. Up to then, all through the school years and all, Marty was there and we did our family things, but nothing really, normal living, loving and kind, and having different events, being together. But Marty Jo, I can honestly say, I can't imagine what that little girl went through. And there were some other things in her life, and I guess I won't bring those up now.
Yeah, thank you, Aunt Louise. I think it's really helping my own heart heal to be able to hear what she went through, and what all of my family went through, and how it eventually led to probably my relinquishment. And I'd like to just fast forward to that point. Like, when did you find out Marty Jo was pregnant with me? And can you kind of give me your view of what that looked like for the family back in 1965?
Well, I was thinking about that, and Terry graduated from high school, and I really, really didn't know until Marty Jo, right before she went to Arizona. In my mind, I may have known earlier, but I don't recall. I can't honestly say that I knew right away, because I think there was probably a lot of things going on within the immediate with Betty Jane and Jim and Marty. And I think if Marty would have had a choice, she wouldn't have gone. Had my mother been alive, I felt quite sure she wouldn't have been gone. But I think Marty at that stage, really, I don't know who she would have turned to. She could have turned to me, but that's why I'm thinking that it was after the fact she was being sent there that I learned.
Yeah, Aunt Louise, just to let our listeners know, I sought out my birth family after having my son, Blake. I was 32 years old when I had my son. I was 33 years old when I found my birth mother, Marty Jo. And when I found her, I learned that she had breast cancer. And a year later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that's a whole nother podcast episode. But I think the important thing to know is that when I discovered my birth family, we were living in Boston at the time, and you guys were only a 3-hour drive away. And I remember the moment I crossed into the Pennsylvania, like it said, the state of Pennsylvania, I actually felt like my entire body knew this place that I had never been to. And I can't really explain that to anyone. And when I met Marty Joe for the first time, I remember she came in with some balloons that said it's a girl, because everyone thought I was a boy all these years. Because when they took me from her, they didn't tell her if she had a boy or a girl. She never got to touch me or hold me, which I think about that now, and it just breaks my heart, like, to think about that. And I wonder, did you always think I was a boy too? Like,
I always thought you were a boy until Marty Jo told me you were a girl when she found me. Because I said a boy, and she says, no, Aunt Louise, it was a little girl.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you knew that I found all of you? What was that like for you?
I was just elated to think, I had a great niece, and it was my brother Bill's grandchild. And you were very special, Heidi. You, from the time, we met you, you're one of us.
Aunt Louise, you have no idea what that means. And I know, like, a lot of our podcast listeners are getting used to me crying. So sorry, that's going to happen a lot. But what I need you to know, Aunt Louise, that's so important to me as I'm still healing from all of this, is that the painful part was not finding all of you. It was what it did to my adopted mom, and it shouldn't have been that way. And I think that's what I want to prevent, is this kind of pain, because when you adopt a child, they have two families. That's the truth. And I just wish my adopted mom could have opened her heart, because you guys would have scooped her up and loved her. And I think the part that was painful for me is I had to sneak around and to see all of you, but I could not let you go once I found you. I couldn't. I had to keep coming, because I knew how fortunate I was to be welcomed back into this big family. And I remember, and I'm sure you remember this too, Aunt Louise, you guys actually had a family reunion for me.
Yes, we did.
And we all went out into the yard at the cabin, and I still remember it just like yesterday. I remember how warm your hand felt. Like, I remember everything. And you gathered maybe 40 people or more in a circle. And I didn't know what was happening. I'm like, are we playing Ring Around the Rosie? What's going on? and then everyone came to quiet, and you offered up a prayer. And you said, now we're whole again. Like, I was the missing link.
You were.
And to have that moment, I don't know how to ever say thank you for that. That was, I love you so much. You've always been so understanding and so caring, even when I had to go sometimes years without seeing everyone because it was too painful on the other end. I knew all of you were waiting and loving me unconditionally, and that is something that is, I don't take it for granted. And I just appreciate that so much, Aunt Louise. It means a lot to me. And I think for me, and I know a lot of adoptees, when we have a reunion, there's a level of grief because we realize sometimes what we've missed. There's also some people that reunite and go, well, thank God I didn't stay with that group. But in my situation, I like hit the lottery when it comes to birth families. And so for me, even in my adult life, I tell you, there are times I just want to come there and stay, like just stay with all of you and immerse myself in this family. Like I miss all of you. And I know maybe that's probably not a healthy way to approach things, but I think sometimes we have to grieve a little bit. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to find all of you and have such beautiful relationships. And we've always welcomed us with open arms. And I wonder, Aunt Louise, having lived almost 100 years, what would you say to like moms that are adopting children? What would you say, like, so that this kind of pain doesn't happen? My mom felt that I betrayed her. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, here's this little innocent baby. And whether you know you're the adopted mom, I've never been in that position, but you would love that baby. And I think I would try to put aside that he or she, was adopted, because that baby would be mine. I can't put it into words how I would feel, but I don't think I would ever deprive that child of knowing where he or she came from, the biological parent. I would be understanding, I would hope I would be, as to why that mother had to give that child up. And that child was entrusted to me to love and to help it grow and become a beautiful person. A baby is a baby, regardless of where he or she comes from. And when you hold that child in your arms, the others should all just go away in my book. Mm. This is an individual, a human being, a little one. I love babies, so I think I could take any child and not hold anything against or deprive that child if they wish to know anything about their background, who the mother was. Because, I look at you, Heidi, your parents did raise you to be a beautiful young woman. And maybe things were a little hard for you at times, understanding, and I can't put myself in your mother's shoes. And I would think that she was thinking at the time, that was probably the best for you. But I think this is where parents should start listening to their children, and try to answer those questions, but to listen and understand maybe why you have these questions.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Louise. Yeah, I think that's where the conflict is, because I did feel grateful to have powerful women raising me. My dad was a little rough, but we all have some rough ones.
They all do that.
And I would like to think that part of how they raised me was to be strong enough to have the courage to really know who I am, all of it. And I think when I did make the decision to find all of you, I struggled with it being a selfish decision. And I chose to do it anyway. So that's just truth telling, that I felt like that. And I think it's really, really complicated. And I think adoptees have all ranges of feelings. Some people don't want to know anything. Other people want to know it all. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, your input about that is really powerful. And, in order to heal my own heart and relieve my own guilt, I guess I want to hear I didn't do anything wrong, but I still feel like maybe I did. Like, it's just hard, Aunt Louise. Help me.
Well, I know that Marty Jo, she shared a lot with me in the later years. And she did tell me that she left it open with the adoption agency, that if you wanted to know about her, she was all for it. Yeah. But she would not push and interfere with what your life, became. And I think that would have been awful hard not to know, had I given a child up for adoption, that I probably, even though I wouldn't do it, I think that would be in my heart that I'd love to know her, But Marty Jo said, she says, I have it open, and if the child wants to get in touch with me, I'm open for it. So yes, that told me that she really, loved you, and she really wanted to know, and it was hard, I think, for her at times to express her feelings. She kept them inward. But I know she loved you, Heidi. And if there'd been another choice, I think you would have been raised here in Pennsylvania.
Oh, Aunt Louise, that means a lot to me. One of the things I want our listeners to know too is when I found my birth mom, and I don't know if this was subconscious or not, when I found Marty Joe, I had an automatic wall up because I didn't want to lose her again, if that makes any sense. So I only let her get so far in my heart, and I regret that now.
Well, and I think she was doing the same for you.
Okay, maybe we both
Being
were.
closer, but she didn't want to interfere, and I know she didn't with you and your mom.
Right, exactly. So
she didn't want to be pushing, and you didn't want to be, and so just talking about it, knowing both sides, you wanted to come together.
yes, and I'm so grateful that I got to know her. I had 10 years to we still were able to be together, but we both kept up a wall. You're absolutely right. And that's just what we knew to do at that time.
Mm-hmm,
So I'm hoping these conversations help other people maybe do it a little better. I think as an older person now and thinking back on it, I'm like, why did I do that? But it all makes sense in the end. And I think the gift that Marty Joe gave me was she never pushed me. She always let me do this on my terms. And Aunt Louise, I wanted to speak about how you think that giving me up affected the rest of her life, because I'm pretty sure it had to. That's such a difficult thing to go through at 17 years old.
I think it had a big impact on her, giving you up in the other episode in her life. That from then on, I don't know, there was always something, I don't want to say like she was searching for peace. And she was getting help. She had a therapist. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yes, right up until, well, when she was really sick that last year, she died. When I was out there with her, she told me she was having a rough time again, just with past things. And I said, you need to talk to someone. She says, I still see my therapist or talk to my therapist. Now, whether anyone else knew that or not, Heidi, I don't know. But there was issues in her life that, I just wish my brother Bill would never died when he did.
Oh, I know, Aunt Louise.
Little girl's life.
I know it's so hard, and I know this has been a difficult conversation, and I appreciate you being willing to go back into those memories. And I think it would help us to end the interview with talking about how spectacular Marty Joe was. Like she was an original. She was so rebellious and fun, and she loved 70s music. I know what I know, but you have a front row seat. Like, how would you describe Marty Joe to me, her daughter, like in all of her glory?
Well, to me, she was a wonderful person. She was fun. She was caring. She was very, very bright. She could have really gone far, education-wise and all, she had that learning, I think, came easy for her. She was fun to be around and made you laugh. And I was proud to have her as my niece, and my brother would have been so proud of her. And I don't know, she was just my Marty. I have a very special letter from her that I still have that she wrote me one time. Just the wording of it and all, it was just beautiful. So I think she was a very special person, and all in all, and I think she'd do anything for anyone. She was just a very special person all around, that's all.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Louise. Aunt Louise, before we go, you and I had a conversation where you were just kind of telling me love, at the end of the day, love is really all that matters. And I just think hearing your words on that would be really powerful for people.
Well, I think love and prayers, forgiveness, are very important. I know over the years, we all have this maybe habit of judging others. And I know for myself, as I have grown older, I look at things differently. I'm happier now than I've ever been. And it's because I believe in God, and He's with me every day. And if I start feeling down or anything like that, I just start talking to Him, and peace comes. So I think that love one another, be forgiving. Patience means a lot. Sometimes it takes a lot of patience in different situations, especially when
all
you're
the time.
Yes. But maybe I've grown more mellow over the years, but I have learned, and I was brought up in a Christian family. My great-grandfather was a Methodist minister. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents during the summer months. They only lived 3 or 4 miles from us, but in Milesburg, and my mother would take me down, put me on the bus, and then my grandmother would meet me at the bus in Milesburg. I'd stay a couple days, and then I'd say, call my dad, I want to go home. I'd get homesick. I'd go home, and I'd be home a few days, and I'd want to go back to my grandparents. But at my grandparents' house, too, was something, I had aunts and an uncle that still lived at home. But I remember, and it played a big impact on my life, that when we went to bed at night, my grandmother sat in a rocker by the window in the girls' bedroom, and she read the Bible to us. And so from a very young age, that made an impact on me, because she would tell us what the scripture was saying to us. And then we would all kneel at the bed and pray. So I think prayer plays a big factor in who we are and what we believe in. I know it has a big impact on my life.
And that's beautiful.
And so again, I think, just accept Jesus as your personal savior and try to live the way He wants us to live. And I know I falter at times. I'm human, but I try very hard to be the person that the Lord would want me to be.
Well, Aunt Louise, I am definitely not Jesus, and I'm not the Lord, but I think you've made it. I would say yes. And I just have to mention really quickly, I still remember the sloppy joes you made for me when I first came into the family. Oh yeah.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here and to be with Heidi and to see Heidi. That's certainly a gift today to me.
Oh, Aunt Louise.
For a while, and hopefully she'll be coming to PA as soon as some of this clears.
Yes.
On in our world today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is one of the things on my list to do. And I just love you so much, Aunt Louise, and thank you for the gift of, for doing this, for going back to painful memories, for also sharing joyful memories with me.